The Western story is shaped not only by battles and treaties, but also by great books. Here are the 7 transformative upheavals in Western history, tracing them back to the written works that inspired, immortalized, and explained the ideas behind them. First is the Christianization of Rome. In the 4th and 5th centuries, the Roman Empire underwent a transformation that would shape Europe for millennium. It embraced Christianity as the state religion. Constantine's Edict of Milan in 313 legalized Christianity, and by 380 Theodosius had made it the empire's official faith. But legal decrees alone cannot explain the depth of this transformation. Persuasive authors were the key to getting the Roman elites to a place where legal change could happen in the first place. Athanasius on the Incarnation defended the doctrine of Christ's divinity against Arianism, clarifying theological disputes for thousands of clergy and laity across the empire. On the Incarnation helped quell Arianism that threatened the fracture of the Church and the fate of Christianity at large. Of course, we can't ignore the huge influence of Augustine's City of God. Written after the sack of Rome in 410, it reoriented spiritual and political thought, arguing that earthly kingdoms were transient and that true authority derived from God, setting up later medieval ideas on leadership like the divine right of kings. These works provided intellectual and spiritual legitimacy for the following Christian political religious order. They offered Romans a coherent vision of society grounded in faith over political willpower that justified the Church's expanding influence across Europe. Second is the Carolingian Reform. The early Middle Ages saw the rise of the Carolingians with Charlemagne crowned emperor in 800 AD. His reign was marked not only by military successes, but more acutely by ambitious cultural and religious reform. The Carolingian reforms sought to unify a fractured Europe through Christian governance, standardizing liturgy, education, and law. Central to this effort were texts such as Admonitio Generalis, hardly a book in truth, but it outlined Charlemagne's decree on moral, educational, and ecclesiastical reforms. A more fundamental work was the Rule of Saint Benedict, written in 530 by Saint Benedict of Nursia. The way of monastic life it outlined was implemented across religious communities to provide spiritual discipline and educational continuity. The Rule of Saint Benedict was formative to the early medieval monastic orders and in turn helped reshape the medieval world. These texts established norms that guided rulers, clergy, and scholars alike, effectively creating a framework for governance and social cohesion that endured long after Benedict's and Charlemagne's death. Next we have the Protestant Reformation. By the early 16th century, criticism of some church practices, such as the sale of indulgences and clerical misconduct, had created space for reform. However, it was the writings of Martin Luther and John Calvin that sparked the unfolding of the Protestant Reformation, or to many, a revolution. Luther's 95 Theses, published in 1517, challenged the sale of indulgences and questioned the long-standing authority of the Pope, sparking widespread debate. His 1522 German translation of the New Testament made Scripture more accessible to lay readers and contributed to the development of the German language. However, it also greatly damaged Christian consensus on interpretation and dramatically increased theological disputes that last to this day. Calvin's Institutes of the Christian Religion in 1536 offered a systematic framework for Reformed theology, emphasizing divine sovereignty, predestination, and the sole authority of Scripture. Its clarity and organization made it a foundational text for Protestant communities, though its rigid structure and rejection of traditional Catholic practices also deepened confessional divides. These works reshaped religious life across Europe, resulting in new forms of worship and governance. Yet they also contributed to fragmentation, political unrest, and the erosion of ecclesiastical unity. The Christian world and the European political landscape was changed forever. Fourth, the English Civil War and Glorious Revolution. 17th century England became the stage for a dramatic confrontation between monarchy and parliament. Charles I's assertion of divine right collided with growing demands for constitutional governance, culminating in civil war, regicide, and the temporary establishment of the Commonwealth. The Glorious Revolution of 1688 further cemented parliamentary supremacy and constitutional monarchy. Thomas Hobbes' Leviathan, written during the Civil War, articulated the necessity of strong central authority to prevent anarchy influencing both royalist and parliamentary thought. In contrast, John Locke's two treatises of government, written earlier but published in 1689, provided the intellectual justification for the overthrow of James II, arguing that government's legitimacy rests on the consent of the governed. These works offered both warning and instruction, guiding a society negotiating the balance between authority and liberty. Fifth, the Americans would fight a revolution for their independence. Across the Atlantic, Enlightenment ideals joined forces with colonial grievances. American revolutionaries sought independence from Britain and a government based on reason, liberty, and natural rights. Thomas Paine's Common Sense, in January of 1776, crystallized these ideas, presenting them in language that was accessible, urgent, and uncompromising. Later that same year, the Declaration of Independence, in July of 1776, translated Enlightenment philosophy into actionable political terms. Drafted primarily by Jefferson, it asserted that governments derive their just powers from the consent of the governed, and that the people have the right to alter or abolish governments that violate their natural rights. By uniting lofty ideals with concrete political demands, the Declaration resounded as a sacred American manifesto. Together, these texts transformed abstract Enlightenment principles into a coherent framework for revolution, empowering colonists to wage war against the mighty British Empire and construct a new democratic republic. Next is the French Revolution. In France, mounting social inequality, fiscal crises, and Enlightenment thought set the stage for dramatic upheaval. Philosophical works such as Rousseau's The Social Contract, 1762, provided the theoretical foundation for popular sovereignty, arguing that legitimate authority derives from the general will rather than inherited privilege. Further, pamphlets like Abbé Sieyès' What is the Third Estate mobilized masses by articulating the political rights of the common people. The Declaration of the Rights of Man and Citizen, 1789, translated revolutionary theory into law, asserting universal principles that could not be ignored. Collectively, these texts moved French society to dismantle monarchy, royal hierarchy, and organized religion to inspire republican ideals, and a bloody revolution that would echo throughout Europe for decades. Lastly, we have the socialist and communist revolutions. The 19th and 20th centuries witnessed revolutions aimed at overturning the economic and social hierarchies of capitalism. Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels' Communist Manifesto in 1848 laid out a vision for global class struggle, inspiring uprisings from Europe to Latin America and pitting two classes against each other based, quite frankly, on coveting and greed. Marx's Das Kapital, 1867, provided the more academic and theoretical underpinnings of his earlier manifesto, attacking capitalism's inherent inequalities and inspiring party leaders to look for alternatives to capitalism. In Russia, Vladimir Lenin's What is to be Done, 1902, translated these ideas into a strategy for revolutionary action, guiding the Bolsheviks' seizure of power in 1917. Together, these texts launched the communist and socialist movements of the 20th century that still linger today. Across these 7 upheavals, from the Christianization of Rome to the communist revolutions of the 20th century, books were significant engines of transformation, serving as the main way radical ideas were spread. They articulated ideas, grievances, and alternatives, providing both the rationale and the impetus for action. Perhaps today, by reading the literature that shapes our current era, we can foresee where the next revolution will lead us. Thanks for watching this video. Our goal is to share the truth and beauty of the West as far as possible, and YouTube is just the beginning of that effort. Help spread that message by liking and subscribing if you haven't already, and hit the bell by the subscribe button to actually get notifications when new videos drop. However, the heart of our work lives on Substack, where we publish the in-depth essays, historical analysis, and cultural commentary that brought you to our channel. If you'd like to be part of that work and help support it, the link is in the description below. Until next time.